I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Yeah, hi everybody. Ron here from The Truth About Addiction. Welcome. Very pleased to have Karen Casey, who's a published author, a very successful author, and a recovering alcoholic. Karen's from America, and I believe I'm privileged to have her on my program today. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much, Ron. I feel very privileged to have been invited to be on your show.
Yeah.
So,
Could you please tell us the Karen Casey story, please?
all right, I'd be happy to. Well, like every story begins with when was that first drink, and that first drink was at age 13, and I grew up not in an alcoholic family, but I grew up in a family where rage was prevalent. My dad, I found out after I got sober and spent time interviewing each of my parents for a, a workshop that I was taking, that he had been afraid his whole life. And I think that it seemed evident to me that that's what really made him an angry person. I think fear and anger kind
Yeah.
of go hand in hand. But so it was a family where we were all walking on eggshells all the time. And I found myself just never feeling the comfort that I wanted to feel in that family. And like we all, I think, decide later in life that our parents probably did do the very best they could. But at the time, it didn't feel like I was getting what I needed. And so I took a drink of alcohol. The family did lots of drinking, and the extended family, there were plenty of alcoholics hanging from the trees all over the place. And so all the big family gatherings, there was lots of alcohol. So at age 13, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and a little Coke
Mhm.
and thought, oh my gosh, this is how I really want to feel.
Yeah.
Why can't I feel like this all the time? And I didn't become a daily drinker at that point, of course, but I always knew that was where some comfort was, in that alcohol. And then, at age 13, what does a young girl want? At least a young heterosexual girl, she wants a boyfriend.
Yeah.
So I went in search of that that guy that was going to make me feel special. And I kind of think, as crazy as this sounds, maybe I kind of think that I came out of the womb codependent. I came out of the womb really looking for somebody that wasn't going to abandon me. And that's a part of my story that I'll share a little bit later too, that that was revealed to me by my mom. But I wanted to find that perfect guy. And you don't ever find the perfect guy. And I ended up starting out making poor choices and went off to Purdue, where I got my undergraduate degree, and ended up marrying the first guy who asked me. Now, we didn't get married till our senior year, but probably like a whole lot of young women, this was back, I'm 83. I graduated from high school in 57. And at that period of time, you went to college in hopes of getting a husband. I mean, that was kind of what it was about. It wasn't so much for women my age at that point about finding a career, as about finding a husband.
Yeah.
Well, he asked me, so I said yes, and without any thought of, is this really the right thing to do? And of course, the one thing that I loved about him, were the two things that I loved about him. And I look at your cars on the wall, and it makes me think of it. He had a red Buick convertible,
Mhm.
and that was certainly a feather in his cap. Um, and he also loved to drink,
Yeah.
and that had become, by that point in my life, very important to me. And so having somebody who was really smart, we happened to have some classes together, and it was always funny because there would always be all these girls in the classes who were kind of listening to what Bill said, because then they could write it down. And so the fact that he asked me, he had a red Buick convertible, he liked to drink, what could be wrong with that choice? Well, a lot could be wrong with that choice. But for 12 years, we were married, and it was a very crazy alcoholic marriage full of all sorts of infidelities on his part. And most of them I knew nothing about until the end. And then he left me for another woman, and it was like, holy shit. After, I shouldn't have said that probably on this recording,
No, you
but
can
that's
say
how I
anything you
felt.
like. You can say anything you like.
And what I really want to say is, holy fuck, how dare you leave me after all I've done?
Yeah.
And, it's like, so that poor choice led Ron to a bunch of other poor choices. And that's how I ended up in Al Anon in 1974. A poor choice ended up in treatment. I certainly hadn't looked at my alcohol use yet, but his counselor took one look at me and said, Karen, you've got all kinds of wrinkles in your forehead. I know what that means. That means you need to go to Al Anon. It's like, what? Well, whoever had heard of Al Anon? Not me.
Mm.
And but it really was an incredible turning point in my life. By this time in my life, I was no longer teaching elementary. I had started graduate school. I ended up getting a doctorate from the University of Minnesota. So, but I had started graduate school, never had a plan for that in my whole life, which convinces me that there always was a plan for my life. I just didn't know about it until things presented themselves. And I walked into that Al-Anon meeting only because it was suggested, and probably, to tell you the truth, probably because it was suggested by a man.
Yeah.
So I went to Al-Anon. And, it was like I walked into that room, though, Ron, and it was like the feeling I had from that first drink at age 13. It was like this warm feeling throughout my body, this sense of comfort, even though I was in a room of people. There were only probably 30 or 35, but it was a room of people I didn't know a soul. And yet I felt as though I was known by them all and knew them. And it was the first time in my life I had ever had that feeling of comfort. I hadn't had it in the feeling in my marriage ever. I hadn't had that feeling in my family growing up. And it really was, I kind of, it was like, what is this? What's going on here? The only drawback from that first meeting, though, was that when I looked at the steps and the traditions on the wall, I thought, this probably will never work for me because of the word God. I was at that point in my life, I was definitely, if not an atheist, an agnostic, and it was like, if I have to believe in God, this is not going to work. So I was relieved when I also heard them say, however you understand God. Because I thought, well, maybe someday I'll have an understanding. I don't, and I felt from the group that it didn't matter that I didn't believe now. But it was really funny because they sent me home from that first meeting with the first little meditation book I had ever seen in my life. And it was One Day at a Time in Al-Anon.
Yeah.
And I thought, my gosh, what in the world is this? A little book with just a little message on each page. But it never occurred to me that it was a message on each page for each day. And I went home that night and I sat down, and you can probably imagine, I sat down and just read it from cover to cover, thinking, oh, now I've got this, here I am. I'm in graduate school. I'm a quick study. And so I went back that next week and they said, "Well, now how are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just fine. I finished the book." And then they all just kind of laughed and said, "Well, now maybe you might want to just start over and take it real slow and easy and just read one page a day." And so I just stuck with them for quite a while. I didn't quit drinking. Nobody said you needed to quit drinking, and today I still go to Al-Anon, and I go to Al-Anon with people who are not alcoholic. I mean, I'm proud to be what we call here in the States a double winner.
Mm.
But in Al-Anon, you certainly don't have to not drink. And in fact, a lot of my Al-Anon friends, we go out for meals and they have a glass of wine. I used to think, and this maybe fits for you too, Ron, from the story I heard from you. When I was a drinker, I thought people who drank wine didn't really drink. It's like, oh, give me a break. A glass of wine, what is that?
Mhm.
And so anyway, I kept going to Al-Anon, and then I was switched into a new relationship, but it was a relationship with somebody who was also court ordered to treatment. And so you kind of, I didn't see at the time, but I look back now, years later, at how much I was being moved closer and closer and closer to this journey that has been mine now for over 46 years. Because he was court ordered, and it was suggested that maybe we do some couples counseling. Well, I found a counselor. I'm a good codependent. I found a counselor for us. And there were 6 other couples. And it was good because it was only going to last for 6 weeks. And it's like, oh, you could do anything for 6 weeks. I thought you could do anything for 6 weeks. The 6 couples, each week, a couple would tell their story and get feedback. Well, never in 6 weeks did that particular significant other ever show up. And I had, as you can imagine, perhaps, as this classic codependent, each week I had an even better excuse than the week before as to why he could not make it.
Mhm.
And because I was so, a codependent doesn't want, I mean, somebody else's behavior you feel defines you. And if he doesn't show up, then it's going to look like I really don't matter in his life.
Mhm.
And you don't want that. You don't want people to have that opinion. So I would have these great excuses. Oh, he had a job interview. Oh, this, oh, that. Each week I'd have a better excuse. And finally, the 6th week, the counselor said, and she was a really nice woman and very patient, but she said, Karen, and this just was like it was like a thud in the room when she said it. She said, "I'm not so sure you have a relationship." It was like, what? And I didn't know if she meant you truly don't have a relationship. You've been fooling us all along. I wasn't sure what she meant, but the reality was I didn't have much of a relationship because he never showed up.
Yeah.
So she said, "Why don't you tell us about your story?" And so I began to share a little bit, quite innocently about my own journey. And she stopped me before I got very far. And she said, Karen, what I'm hearing is that you really need Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was like, what? Me? And she said, I'm hearing from you all kinds of signs and indications that you have a problem with alcohol, as well as these other partners in your life. And so she said, would you be willing to go to AA? And, I always wanted to be adaptable and accommodating. I mean, it was all about, what are you going to think about me? So I said, sure, I'll go to AA. And so she asked if anybody in the group would take me. And of course, you know how willing we are to help others. I mean, that's really what our lives are about.
Yeah.
And a couple people said, "Well, we'll take you next week." And so that following Monday, I showed up at a meeting here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Uh, and I thought maybe they won't show up. And I was to meet them outside of this church. And I kept asking myself, will I go in if they don't show up? Well, they did show up, and I did go in. And Ron, I was blown away. It was a room of about 200 people, men and women, lots of good looking men.
Mm.
And I walked in and I thought, holy shit, this is where I should have been all along. I didn't need to be sitting on those bar stools. I should have been here at AA meetings. Look the kind of men I would have found if I had shown up here earlier. And that was May 24th, 1976. And I have never ever walked away. And I have been committed to both programs ever since. And that, you know, one of the things though that I still struggled with was that whole idea of God. And it didn't come easily for me. I don't know about you, if that came easily for you or not, but I would go to a meeting and I would feel connected, and I loved the meetings and I loved the people in the meetings. And then I would leave and go home and feel very disconnected. And so after about 18 months, I decided that it was time to just end it. And so I had every intention of just ending my life, and it didn't seem like a big damn deal.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in my one bedroom apartment, $100 a month, one bedroom apartment. This is a long time ago. And you couldn't rent a room now for $100 a month. Here in Minneapolis, it costs you $500 a month to rent one room.
Yeah.
But back then, you know, I sat in that apartment and rolled up all the towels to tuck in around the windows to turn on the gas.
Mm.
And then there was a knock at the door, a totally unexpected knock. And I was shocked. And it kept persistent. There was this persistent knock. And so I finally went to the door and they said, "Who is there?" And this woman's voice says, "Pat, you have an appointment with me." And I said, "What?" She said, "You have an appointment with me. I'm a financial planner. I'm here to talk to you about your finances." And it's like, God, give me a break. $100 a month apartment? I'm teaching at the university for pennies. And but I ended up opening the door because she sounded so insistent. And there stood this absolutely lovely, red-haired, tall woman who I had never seen before. And she pulled out a daily planner, which is what everybody used way back in those days. And sure enough, there was my name. And it was like, how did this happen? And she came in and sat down. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, no, actually, I'm pretty depressed." And she said, "Well, you know, I know quite a bit about depression." She said, "I've been there." And she said, "My husband's a recovering alcoholic, and he struggled a lot with depression." And so we sat there and we had this incredible conversation about spirituality. And she said, "You know, depression and spirituality really kind of walk hand in hand often." And she said, "It's my understanding that you are on this deep depression means you're on the precipice of a new spiritual breakthrough. And you just have to be willing to believe that there is a presence that wants to help you."
Mm.
And she talked a bit more and she said, "There's a name for this." And totally surprising to me. She said it's called chemicalization. She told me a book that it was explained in by a woman named Catherine Ponder.
Mhm.
And Anyway, she said, trust me, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're on the precipice of something new and beautiful. And do you think she talked about finances? No. She got up, walked to the door, and she turned back to me, reached her arms out to give me a hug, and she said, Karen, everything is fine. That presence is here right now. And she walked out. And of course, I never saw her again.
I knew you were going to say that.
You know, it was like, oh my God. When she walked out, and even when I think about it today, all these years later, because I was 18 months sober when that happened, it gives me goosebumps to think. And I have come to believe, and I don't know, I know that not everybody believes this, but I have come to believe that she was sent. That it wasn't an accident that she knocked on my door. That she was on an assignment of some kind. And believe me, I believe that because I wouldn't be here otherwise. I mean, I would have ended it that day because it seemed like no big damn deal. And so I went on about my life, but the odd thing was it did not, that experience with Pat didn't give me the constant assurance of, I had discovered in graduate school, Ron, that writing, and as an undergraduate, I was a C student. When I applied for graduate school, they turned me down and said, you got to take some graduate classes and reapply. You're not smart enough, probably. I reapplied because I'd gotten all A's. I discovered in graduate school, and this blew my mind and it blows my mind yet today, that writing for me was like falling off of a log. I never, ever once struggled to sit down and write a paper. And when you're in graduate school, I'm sure you write a lot of damn papers. And it just was like a mystical experience for me every time I would sit down. And so even when I got to my dissertation, and I never ever wrote an outline, and I got to my dissertation to that point, which is the final big deal. And that was when I quit drinking because I knew I wasn't going to be able to write that. I had been drinking all the way through graduate school. And I wasn't sure I could ever write a thing again in my life if I wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
But I knew somehow that there was no way I was going to write a 300-page dissertation sitting on a bar stool. So that's when I ended up, everything kind of came together all at the same time. And I, quit drinking, went to see my professor about writing the dissertation. And he said, well, why don't we look at your outline first? And I said, well, I don't have one. And he said, what? And he said, I've never had a doctoral student without an outline before. And I said, well, I don't know how to write one. And now, mind you, I was teaching writing at the University of Minnesota. I was teaching other people how to write outlines.
Yeah.
But I, honest to God, that was beyond me because I never needed to write an outline. And he was such a gentle, loving man. In fact, he was the man who ended up performing the wedding ceremony for me and my husband now. But he said, well, I've never had a student that didn't have one before, but there's a first time for everything. If you don't think you need one and it works for you, it'll work for me. And, it's just what that convinced me of, though, ultimately in time, was that what I needed to do to find God was to write.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even referring to him as God. I was referring to just this comforting presence. And so I began sitting in a big old beat up brown recliner at night, writing. And it felt like I was being spoken to. And those Well, all of those essays were really what they were, is what became my very first book, Each Day a New Beginning,
Yeah, right.
that was published in 1982. And this, in fact, and this is not how it looked then. It was a little green book published by Hazelden, and now this has been republished. I mean, it's been in the marketplace in treatment centers and stuff ever since, but now this has been republished by a different publisher, but and it doesn't look the same anymore. However, it is the same book. But what I was going to say is, I didn't sit down to write something for anybody else, which sounds really selfish, but it was a really selfish pursuit because I was simply trying to find comfort for myself.
Yeah.
And it provided comfort for myself. And at that period of time, Ron, I was working. I got a job at Hazelden after I finished my PhD. I got a job at Hazelden. I wanted to go be a writer. And they said, no, we don't hire writers, but we'll hire you for this job. And so I went to work there, but I ended up on this mad search. And the president of Hazelden kind of was interested in my journey and said, how are you doing, Karen? And I said, well, I've struggled a lot. But I'm writing to see if I can't find a connection. And he said, would you mind letting me see what you're writing someday? And so I ended up at some point working up the courage really to share with him what I was writing. And much to my amazement, he came back and said to me, Karen, I think this needs to be a book for other women.
Yeah.
Because what you're experiencing and writing about, I think is something that would be close to the hearts of other women. And so, it's like when I look at my entire journey, Ron, it just feels like everything has followed along in just as it needed to. That there was the perfect time and the perfect place for everything in my life. And, I sit back here today after over 46 years in AA and still actively going to AA and Al Anon too. And married to a man who's 45 years. I don't know if they use this terminology in Australia, but here they always say you got 13 stepped by somebody.
Yeah.
And he always tells people that I 13 stepped him because I've got a year more recovery than him. Yeah. And but at any rate, we did meet early in his recovery. That is true. And it is true that I was aware he was noticing me, but I won't say another word.
Lucky him.
Yeah, right. But it was just, I feel like everything happened. Sometimes it feels like, well, I was just in the right place at the right time. Now I think that it's more than that,
Yeah.
not everybody has that kind of belief that things happen the way they should. But maybe part of it's age. But I just want my life to be real simple. And so for me, the simplest way to think about it all is things happen the way they needed to.
Yeah.
And it all came down to you and I needing to have this conversation.
Yeah.
This evening. I don't know what time it is. What time is it there?
It's only early here. It's only 9:30.
Okay, see, here it's 5:30
Yeah.
at night. So at Minneapolis.
9:30 in the morning. Yeah.
No, 5:30 at night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I've got good friends that are right there in your little community right now from Minneapolis here that are over there visiting. They have a daughter who lives over there. She married an Australian and she lives there.
Okay.
And so they've been over there it's coming up on 3 months that they've been there visiting. So I'm going to let them know when when this is going to actually be able for them to tune into it.
Maybe you should come and visit me one day.
I would, Ron, but I don't. When I hear Kathy and Mike, and they've gone many times to Australia, and I hear them talk about that long, long, long trip, 19 hours from LA.
Yeah, it is a long trip.
And I think, I don't think that I have it in me anymore. That was a trip that I needed to take when I was a lot younger. And I have some health issues. I have a lung condition that I don't have the kind of energy I used to.
Yeah, 100, yeah.
So, I think that taking a long trip like that is something that I really couldn't do anymore, much to my sadness. Because it
Yeah,
would be great. It would be great. I hear wonderful things about Australia.
we have a good fellowship over here. We have a good, strong 12-step program base. Yeah, and
I knew that they did because I know that Kathy and Mike talk about it when they go over there.
we were lucky. For me, I got introduced to AA in 1977. I was nowhere near ready. I was
Hmm.
I was hiding in a detoxification unit because the cops were looking for me.
Oh yeah,
So I went to the detox unit with some methadone, which is a substitute for heroin,
yeah.
and some pot.
Oh yeah.
It was a lovely place on the river, and a guy came and picked me up and took me to an AA meeting. Lovely chap, lovely chap. And on the way to the meeting, he was trying to explain to me about the disease of alcoholism and addiction. And I still remember everything he said. I said, I know. When you go to a meeting, you get that newcomer. You're trying to help them. Everything you say is like, I know. Yeah, I know. I feel like saying, shut the hell up. You don't know.
Exactly.
Take the cotton wool out of your ears, shove it in your mouth, and let me
Yeah.
explain to you what's happening in your poor little brain.
Yeah.
No, when people say to me, "Oh, you're trying to brainwash me," I say, "If I need to brainwash you, I'll spit on a tissue. That's how big your brain is." Listen, So he said to me in 1977, he said, "Ron, the road to hell is full of good intentions." He said, "And you're full of them." It took me 4 years to understand what he meant.
Yeah.
I went back to prison. I went back to prison, and because I'm an escapee from prison, I couldn't get bail. I couldn't get bond to get out of the prison. And somebody told me that there was such a thing as a drug rehabilitation center. I didn't want to get clean. I wanted to get out of prison.
Yeah.
What happened was a guy came to 12-step me, and it was a guy that came from the rehab. He was an alcoholic, country boy, nothing like me. I'm a city boy, criminal. And this guy was a country boy, really beautiful. And he came to visit me to do a 12-step. And it's a true story. And I came back after the visit and said to all the guys in the prison yard, he was an undercover cop, that guy. He knew everything about me because he was a recovering alcoholic. Of course he knew everything about me.
Yeah.
I was convinced that he was an undercover cop,
Yeah.
like,
Right. That makes sense. Right.
yeah. But this guy came to the courthouse 6 weeks in a row. I never got visits from my family 6 weeks in a row. And he came and he said to the judge, please give him a chance, please give him a chance. And this is where I believe in divine intervention, my higher power's way of keeping his anonymity and working behind the scenes. The judge said, Mr. Isherwood, you've never had a chance in your life. I was 27 years of age. He said, I'm going to let you go to rehab. He said, if you stuff this up, you're going back to jail. And I went to rehab and I didn't get clean. I got clean. I stayed clean for 10 months. I fell in love. I met the perfect rat house romance.
Right. Right.
I have 40-year-old twin daughters from that rehab.
Yeah.
But what I got was the therapeutic value of one addict alcoholic helping another.
Yeah.
The first time in my life, I got that feeling that you talked about. I actually felt like I belonged.
Yeah.
I actually felt empathy and compassion for another human being, which I'd never felt before.
Yeah.
I'd never felt that in my home. I'd never seen my father say, I love you. I'd never seen my father cut on my mother.
Yeah.
I shot a man when I was 16 with my father, and he abused me for only shooting him in the leg, for not killing him. So I had a really dysfunctional upbringing.
Yeah.
When I told my dad I wanted to be a lawyer, he said, "You want to fight the cops, you buy a gun.
Yeah.
Education is for stupid people." He didn't believe in education.
Yeah.
All my children have gone to private schools,
Ah,
and they've all got
wonderful.
education. I've sent my children all to private schools and given them education because I was lucky enough. I never stayed clean from my first meeting. For 5 years, I mucked around. I didn't muck around. I had 10 months, 12 months, then 30 months.
Yeah.
My first fourth step, I discharged with a priest because I knew he couldn't tell anybody.
Oh, that was very clever.
Yeah, it was, but I was afraid. I had a God of fear. And my new
Yeah.
sponsor, who I've now had for 37 years, when I came back from my relapse on the 3rd of the 3rd, 1986, he said to me, "I don't want you to do the first 3 steps. I want you to do a 4th step. I want you to write your life story. And I want you to write me your relationship." Because I love to write. You
Oh,
know,
neat.
I've just finished a book. It's been published this year. That's my
Oh,
life story.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's my life story. So we published it. It's being published in August this year, released.
Oh, neat. That's wonderful.
Yeah, but I was brought up without education. I couldn't read and write when I went to prison. I taught myself. Then I went and did writing courses in prison, and I taught myself to read and write. But I wrote a lot of letters. I wrote a letter to God, and I didn't know who God was. I wrote a letter to my mum, who's passed away. Then I realised that I got a lot of relief out of writing,
Yeah.
and it was really important for me to get all this rubbish out of me. And my sponsor said to me when I did my life story with him, my 4th step, he said, "No wonder you haven't stayed clean. You've got a God of fear." He said, "How do you hand your will and your life over to somebody you're afraid of?" I was afraid of my father.
Yeah.
So I'd adopted this belief system that God punished me and God tested me and all this stuff. And I said to him, "What is your God? What is your God?" And he said, "He loves me, understands me, forgives me." And it felt like somebody punched me in the stomach
Mm.
because that was what I wanted my whole life. I wanted love, understanding, and forgiveness. Just
Yeah.
before this happened, only weeks before a month before this conversation I'm having with my sponsor, I'm in full blown active addiction. I'm drinking. I'm not drinking at all. I haven't had drinks since '82, but I'm using heroin and I'm drinking methadone. And I had a dream. This is crazy. My daughters were 3 years of age on this relapse, and I had a dream that I was walking down the beach holding my daughter's hands, but they were about 8. And I woke up the next morning. I thought that was a crazy dream. Like my kids are growing up, so I'm not dead. The very next night, I had a dream that I died.
Mm.
This dream, that you said talked about that lady coming to you.
Right.
This dream is exactly the same, and I get goosebumps every time I talk about it. And I've talked about it more in the last 5 years than I talked about it in the first 30 years. I had a
Yeah.
dream that I died, and because of our imagination and our teachings, I was going to wherever you go, but I was elevating towards some higher power, I guess, because I believe heaven's up there and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And on my way there, I'm justifying all my actions. Oh, but I only stole from corporate companies. Oh, the guys I shot, they were gangsters, and I'm doing all this justification. And I get there and there's a guy with a long coat on, long hair, the beard, like what you imagine this
Right. Right.
at the gate, whoever it is. So I'm there and I'm justifying everything. I'm saying, "Man, look, the people I shot, they were bad guys, and I never harmed anybody innocently." And he was smiling all the time while I'm trying to bullshit the bullshitter. I'm trying to get into
Yeah.
the
Right.
I'm trying to
Right.
get into the club.
Yeah. Right.
And he smiles at me and he goes, "You don't get it, do you, Ron?" And I remember the cold fear because I knew that I was in trouble. He said, "You committed the greatest sin man could commit." And I remember freaking out inside. He said, "You wasted the gift of life."
Mm.
And it was a
Wow.
revelation. It was a spiritual awakening right there and then. I went to
Right.
detox. I jumped off 120 mil of methadone, which you can die. I cold turkeyed off that, and I've been clean ever since that day.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
Now that's 37 years ago. Next month, on the 3rd of the 3rd, I'm 37 years clean. But that was that spiritual defining time where something happened. And I have lots of people who've told me of instances where things like that have happened. And you can't tell me that that's not some sort of divine intervention. I don't know what God is. I don't have to know
Yeah.
what it is. I've just got to believe that it works.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is-
It's, yeah. I mean, I don't think we have to explain or anything. We just know that something changed for us.
yeah, yeah,
And we made a right hand turn or left hand turn. We something changed that dramatically influenced us. And that is for sure what has happened in my life. And nothing has been quite the same since Pat knocked on that door
yeah,
and I saw my name in her book, and she never said word one about finances.
yeah. And to me, that's this way of our higher power keeping his anonymity.
Yeah.
I always say,
Yeah.
I say to new guys, I say to new people, they tell me a story. There's a guy tells a story that he was lost. He went to go to a meeting, and he was like in his mind, like I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And then this big guy who was about 6'7" was standing there and said, "Are you looking for the AA meeting, are you, boy?" And the guy goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "It's in here," and he shows him the way. This guy has never ever seen that guy again. This guy's about 24 years clean now.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
he was leaving. He said, this
Yeah.
big giant of a man sort of just appeared out of nowhere, and he was standing between the gate and the door. And he said, "You looking for the AA meeting, are you, son?" He goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "It's in there." And Mark said, I sort of looked at him, I thought, "Oh, shit, I'm going in there." That guy never went to the meeting, and Mark has never seen him again. There's got to be something in it.
There has to be. I so agree.
There has to be.
Yeah. It's like I know the name of your blog or your whole thing is, what is it about? The truth about addiction.
Truth about addiction.
And I found that so interesting because, you know, um, who, I'm not sure I know the truth about addiction. All I know is that everybody I have ever met seems to have some addiction in their life, it seems.
Yep.
And some addictions get us into more trouble than others.
100%.
But I am so glad that I ended up taking that first drink at age 13 because of the way my life has evolved.
Mm.
And when I said before about that whole being born codependent, you know, when I had been sober just a short while, and I had taken that class, that workshop on family of origin, and they said, go talk to your parents to find out about their lives. And so many of us know very little about our parents, and all I knew is that my parents never seemed, like I said, my dad, I always felt like my dad would have been an alcoholic if he could have allowed himself to, but he had this attitude, by God, I'm not going to drink like all the rest of the members of the family. And so there was always that anger, and my mother was always nervous about his anger and afraid of making a mistake. And so there was never any sense of real compatibility or support between them. And I went back and said, I'd like to talk to each of you. And they were both really kind of nervous, Ron, because I had been the kid that had really acted out. I had two older sisters and a younger brother, and I was the one that had really acted out. And I mean, they knew from my young age that alcohol was way too appealing to me, and bad boys were even more appealing to me. And and so it was kind of like, and my politics didn't appeal to them because I was really very liberal and they were much less so.
Mm.
My dad used to always say to me, "When you grow up, young lady, your politics will change." And and they haven't.
You
But
told
at
you
any
weren't
rate,
growing up?
yeah, right. I have not grown up, and my politics have not changed. You're right.
Exactly.
So, but when I went back and I sat down first with my mother, and I said, "Mother, I just want you to tell me about your life. How do you feel about your life?" And Ron, I was just dumbfounded. She just immediately started to sob. And I had seen my mother cry before because she'd gotten her feelings hurt by my dad on many occasions. Of one example, and I only want to share it because it gives you an indication of my dad and how inappropriate he was at times. One night we were sitting at the supper table, and and we were having hamburgers, and that was when ketchup bottles, you pressed down on the top and the ketchup came out. And he had sat there, and unbeknownst to any of us, he was kind of lining up the ketchup bottle, and then went, and the ketchup went across the table and all over my mom's face and her glasses.
Mm.
And it was like, what the hell? And my mother just sat there for a minute, and just the tears just streamed down her face in amongst the ketchup. And my dad, I think, thought the whole thing was funny, and it was so mean and humiliating.
Yeah.
So I had seen my mother cry appropriately many times, but never like she cried that morning. And she just sobbed, and she said, and I moved over on the couch next to her, and she said, "I never felt like I was a good wife because it was hard to be a good wife to my dad. I never felt like I was a good mother, and I never wanted you when I was pregnant for you." And she said, I feel like maybe that's why you're an alcoholic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, first of all, you were a great mother. Secondly, I, I said, I thank you for telling me that you hadn't wanted me because that answers a lot of questions for me. And I want to talk more about that. And third, it is not your fault I'm alcoholic.
Mm.
But she explained to me that with my two older sisters, she had had such difficult pregnancies that the doctor said you shouldn't have any more children. And my dad wanted a son, of course.
Yep.
And so when she was pregnant for me, she was really afraid that it would not be a son.
Yeah. Wow.
It was a very hard a very hard pregnancy. And so she really hadn't wanted me.
Yeah.
And I really think that you pick up that, you get that imprinting in the womb.
I believe
So
that.
I really think that when I was born, when I came out of that womb, I came out feeling abandoned.
Wow.
And that was just but her telling me, and this is what's so incredible, Ron, the healing that took place between my mother and I, because of what I was such a naughty girl, really. Um, the healing that took place between us was so amazing because we just sat there and we both cried and held each other.
Mm.
And I was able to just say, no, it wasn't your fault. And thank you for answering questions for me. Because it did. It's like one poor choice of a man after another, one codependent relationship. And it's when you think about addiction, I don't know what your feeling is, Ron, but I really think a whole lot of people have codependency as an issue in their life, along with whatever else they might be addicted to.
Yeah.
Because we get so caught up in in trying either to control other people or change their behavior in some way or change ourselves so they won't reject us. Like with my first husband, it's like I used to try to figure out when we would talk about a movie we saw, my God, I wonder what he thought about it so I can say that,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that he won't say, "Oh, Karen, that's so stupid." You're a third grade teacher. What do you know? Because that is the kind of comment he would make.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But listen, Ron, I finished my doctorate. He never did.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. 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 Beautiful.
He never finished his. And that's a terrible way for me to behave after all these years. We
Oh,
got
it's not.
divorced, and I got sober in 76, and we were divorced in 73. But I must say, every now and then, it kind of makes me chuckle
Yeah.
that what he set out to do, he didn't accomplish, but I did.
We're
But
human beings first. We're male and female second, and we're addict, alcoholic third. And the human side of me liked that a lot.
yeah,
It's
you
normal.
know,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, right. Life has been an amazing journey, and I look back on all of those early troublesome times. I had been, I hate the word victim, but I had been sexually abused as a kid by uh, a peripheral family member.
Yep.
And, but I look at that too. And there were a lot of years that I just, because he would show up at family things that, of course, I just skirted his presence. But, I reached a point where I was, through the help of a counselor, able to honestly, completely feel forgiveness for him. And he and I never spoke of it. I never told anybody in the family, but I had written him a letter at the advice of the counselor, not that I sent, of course.
Yep.
And about a week after I had written him this letter that was so angry, I got this strong feeling that I needed to sit down at the computer. And I never ever questioned that because of the way my writing had always gripped me anyway. And I sat down at the computer and found myself writing Dear Karen. And it was a letter from him.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And it was, I'm sitting here with goosebumps, a letter from him asking for my forgiveness and telling me about his childhood of sexual abuse.
Wow. How powerful.
And it was, I honestly, from that moment on, anytime I saw him, I felt a genuine love for the pain in his life.
Mm. It's
And
wow.
he and I never needed to discuss it at all. And having that experience with forgiveness really allowed me to help other women.
Yeah.
I mean, men and women both have have been inappropriately sexually touched and raped and all sorts of things. And it has really helped. That experience with forgiveness has helped me to talk with others about the freedom that comes with forgiveness.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
held in bondage if we're not willing, I feel.
Yep.
If we're not willing to finally forgive, we're held in bondage.
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. They talk about, resentments, drinking poison and hoping someone else dies. It's the
Right,
same thing.
right, exactly.
I,
Exactly. I want, I just want, particularly at 83, Ron, I just want,
I love it.
I just want a sweet, kind of calm life. I've never had children. I always felt like that was part of the journey too. You know, God, I had 5 pregnancies, 2 ectopics, and between those 2 ectopics, I had 3 miscarriages. I always, I've always felt like um, God figured that there was a different kind of birthing that I was supposed to do,
Yeah.
and I've never questioned that. And so my husband and I have a wonderful yellow Labrador.
Yeah, I've seen you walk past
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah. And then she says her name is Nellie, and it's like, really, we got her. I was 76 when we got her, and it was like people said, "You guys at your age are getting a puppy."
Yeah. Yeah.
Best thing we ever did.
But you touched on, you said you didn't have any kids. You've had a lot of kids. How many
Yeah,
people have you
yeah.
helped? How many people have you helped in the time that you've been in the program where we adopt them? Everybody calls me Uncle Ronnie.
I bet.
Most of the guys call me Uncle Ronnie because, in NA, which I'm more affiliated with NA than I am AA because it's just the way it worked out.
Yeah,
But I think my higher power has, like you said, has guided me, and he keeps having to bang me back onto track, because I keep getting off track.
yeah,
I want to be this, I want to be that, and he always keeps knocking me back, and I end up by being what my higher power wants me to be. And I
yeah.
heard something a while ago now, and it resonated with me. It said, "I don't pray for things. I don't. I just say please and thank you. I say thank you for
Yeah,
helping me stay clean and safe for the last 24 hours. Please help me stay clean and safe. I ask him to love my family, protect my family. I don't ask for things for me because he knows what's best for me.
right. Exactly.
I ask.
Exactly. Look at the life you've had and the life I've had.
Yeah.
And had had I gotten what I thought I wanted,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would still be chasing after some poor choice of a man. That's how crazy I was, sitting on some bar stool next to some wrong person.
Yeah.
And like I said, went into that first AA meeting, and I thought, holy shit, this is where I should have been all along.
I
Look
love
at
that.
all, because I was 36,
Yeah.
and most of the people in that group were and like I say, over half of them were men, and there were 200 people there, and so most of these men were in their 30s and 40s, and it was like, oh my god, what?
Hunting fields.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here's where they all are, Karen. What's the matter with you?
My
So
wife, when I met my wife's younger than me, and just by a couple of months. Um,
yeah,
this is number 5. So,
well,
and I asked her, I said, "What do you want out of a relationship?" She said, "I just want to be loved and treated nice." Because she'd come out of an abusive relationship, and I've fulfilled that commitment to her for the last 11 years. I've loved her and I've treated her nice.
oh,
And we've had the
wonderful.
best relationship. We've had the most incredible relationship. My children are 40 years of age. They've never seen me drunk or stoned.
Yeah,
One of my kids is 15 years clean in AA
oh, wonderful. Yeah,
because she knew where to come. She's when my drinking and drugging got out of control, I knew where to come because my dad goes there. And
yeah.
she's a nurse. She runs her own detox unit.
Wow.
She runs a detox unit for alcoholics and drug addicts. And
Yeah,
these are things that our higher power had to have done.
right.
Because you go back into my family background, it's full of no hopers and bums.
Yeah,
And my family background, my dad was like your dad. He never drank.
yeah,
He would have been better off drinking
yeah. My dad too.
because he was a dry drunk.
Yeah, yeah.
He-
My dad did occasionally have a martini, but he was a constant dry drunk.
Yeah, my dad was just a gangster, violent, aggressive, hateful, spiteful. I mean, that when you talked about the thing he did to your mum,
Yeah,
my if you came to visit us and you had a little 5-year-old child and he'd say, "Oh, come over here," and the kid rejected him, you can guarantee within the next hour that kid would be crying because he stood on his ankle or he pinched him or he done something
Yeah.
revengeful to harm that child because his feelings got hurt.
Yeah.
His reactions were
Yeah.
to
My dad, my dad over on, my dad, like I said, had wanted a boy. I wasn't a boy.
Yep.
Fourth child, my mother had a boy, but he wasn't the boy my dad wanted.
Yeah.
He wasn't. And my dad, poor Jim, when he started first grade, they were not teaching phonics. They were teaching sight reading. So Jimmy never really learned how to read.
Yep.
And he flunked out of college. He just never did well in school. And my dad's name for my brother was Dumb Bunny. You're just nothing but a dumb bunny.
Yeah.
And I can remember the two of them standing out in the yard and my dad throwing a ball at Jim, and Jim would try to catch it with a mitt, and he would miss it, of course, because he was just really awkward. And my dad throwing down the ball and saying, "I'm not going to play with you." And after my dad died, Jim, about 4 years ago, my dad had been gone for a long time, called me up one night and said, "I have finally been able to forgive Daddy."
Yeah.
And he had a full-blown nervous breakdown when he was 20 years old. And he'd taken bookkeeping and gotten a job after he flunked out of college. He'd gotten married real young. And actually my dad, unfortunately, had helped him get a job. But my dad would drive by this company every day on his way to the bank. And because my dad was a banker. And if Jim's car wasn't in the lot, he would get to his office, and you can imagine he would call Jim, "Why aren't you at your job yet?" And pretty soon Jim wasn't even able to go to the job anymore.
Wow.
And finally his boss came to his house and said, "Jim, I'm so sorry. I am going to have to let you go. But I want to tell you, I have already made an arrangement for you to be interviewed by a man in Indianapolis, Indiana. Here is your letter of recommendation. You need to get out of this town as soon as possible because your dad is destroying your life."
Get away from Dad.
Yeah, and thank God for Mr. Flieger, because that was, I'll never forget that dear man, because he really saved my brother.
Wow.
And and that was my own dad's. It was all about his fear of not being perfect himself. So man, he wanted everybody else to be perfect, and none of us were.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite sad the effect that our families have had on us. When I'll send you my book once it's published, you'll see
Oh, I would love it. I would love it.
two parts here. My book finishes in 2002, and then I'm rewriting the second one now. But I've written letters to my mum. My mum passed away when I was 19. I've written letters to her. I'm a big believer in writing and then burning. I write the letters and I burn them. But the one from Mum
Yeah.
I've kept. And I wrote a letter to God too. I actually wrote a letter to God and had a go at him. When I was in prison, like, who the hell are you? What do you think? Do you remember a book called Conversations with God?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I read that in early recovery, and I might have drawn inspiration from that. I don't know, but it's quite funny when you talk about writing, and because I love writing, but I was always ashamed of it because men don't write, not where I came from. Yeah, and you don't express your emotions. And I've always hidden. I wrote poetry, and I've written lots of thousands of poems, and I've manuscript after manuscripts after manuscripts of my writings. Like everywhere you look, is
Wow. Do you have a publisher?
no, not yet.
No, well, because the publisher that I have now, the first many books of mine were published by Hazelden, who is the big treatment center and publisher in Minnesota. But then I ended up at one point there was a book I wrote called Fearless Relationships. No, the next book I wrote, Change Your Mind and Your Life Will Follow. They didn't want. So I took it to Canary. Well, Canary, and so then I published a whole bunch with them. And then Mango the publisher I have now for this, Vought Canary, they're a great little publisher. And
It's
I
a-
know, and I know who you should send your book to.
All right. No, but I'll take you up on that because I haven't got a publisher, and I'm a bit nervous. And
Sure.
it's a very good read. It's very honest.
Yeah, I'd love to read it. Yeah. And I will give you a high sign with Brenda. That's for sure.
No, thank you, no. But
Loved our conversation.
yeah. Look, I was inspired when my wife said, "Do you want to do a podcast with this woman?" I said, "Please." And you know what? Our relationship is for a reason. This is happening for a reason. There's going to be a lot more to this conversation than today. I know
Yeah.
that. I know there's going to be a lot more. And it's been inspiring. I love people that help people.
Yeah.
People,
Well,
you know,
you
like
look at all the people you've helped, and I mean, I think that that's one of the greatest gifts of recovery is that we really want to then help others. My husband feels like people who really are on the good recovery path stay there because they're willing to help others.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I went to a meeting last night. People say to me, "Why do you still go to meetings?" I said, "Because I'm still an alcoholic. I'm still a
yeah,
drunk."
right.
They go, "Oh, do you just come to help other people?" I said, "No, if somebody else gets help, that's a bonus. But I come here to help myself."
Right, right. I still need them. I still need them. Joe and I, there's a Saturday morning meeting. I go to a lot of Zoom meetings because when the quarantine happened, and
Yep.
I host a bunch of Zoom meetings. But when the quarantine happened, I got into lots of Zoom meetings, but we do go to a Saturday morning in-person meeting here in Minneapolis every week. And there are a lot of Native American people in that group. And one of the greatest things is they refer to us as the elders
Yeah, yeah,
because we are number one, the elders in the group, but we've both got such long-term recovery, and it's such a compliment from them
yeah.
to be called the elders.
I'm that, like, because up where I live, I'm the oldest, cleanest member in the area.
Yeah,
They all, as I said, they call me Uncle Ron. Most of the people call me Uncle. And in Australia, uncle's a compliment. The Aboriginals, if they call someone their uncle, that's a sign of respect.
yeah,
The uncles are the elders, so I take that as a compliment. But the truth of the matter is, I believe we can only keep what we have by giving it away. I believe that 1,000,000%.
I do too. I absolutely do too.
I believe the therapeutic value of one alcoholic addict helping another is without parallel.
Yeah,
I believe that 1,000,000%. And I believe there is a loving higher power, as he may express himself, working in our lives today.
I believe that too.
And I also only make two promises because I run a rehabilitation centre, and I'm going to start giving ladies your books. I'm going to buy a few of your books and give them away as gifts
Oh, thank you.
because I have a lot of ladies. I'm not a. This is going to sound terrible. I don't like. It's not that I don't like. I don't feel adequate counselling women. I don't.
Yeah,
My motivations are beautiful and my motivations are perfect. I'm not caught up in any of that rubbish, but I don't understand hormones. I don't understand all this stuff that's going on behind the
yeah,
scenes
yeah,
in the
right.
factory. I don't understand the
Yeah,
factory,
yeah. Well, yeah, lots of women don't understand it either.
Yeah. And so I am going to start trying to push more women into what you're doing because, you know, I love what you're doing. I think you've been, incredibly blessed. And I think we've been incredibly blessed to have you. I think it's a two-way street.
Oh, thank you.
I really do. I think it's a two-way street. Like you've been blessed to be given a gift, but you've freely given that gift. And
Yeah,
there's nothing nicer than a person giving.
that's right. I so agree.
And that's why you're here today, and that's why, I believe, we've been chosen.
Yeah, I believe that so much. Some people you say that to, and you don't. Are they kind of look at you like? But I do. I believe that we have been chosen
Yeah.
because we are going to pass it on.
We were strong enough to
Right.
survive.
Yeah,
And we have an obligation to keep passing that on.
I agree.
and a responsibility to carry the message of recovery, not the message of the disease, not the message of madness. So we have to
Right.
work a program so we can carry that message.
Absolutely.
You know? And a lot of people don't get
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Some people get up from the floor and they start spewing this bullshit, this ego, self-centered, self-motivated crap, you know. And I usually say to them after, man, you know, you really need to talk to your sponsor, brother.
Yeah. Right.
You're not the one doing this. You have a loving God as he may express himself. You know, get humble, get
Yeah.
fair income, you know, get it. Australian, we have a word called fair income, which is you say you guys are saying you got to get real. You know, you got to get real. You got to stop this facade, you know. It's okay to
Right.
be vulnerable. It's okay to be humble. It's okay to be proud. I'm not
Yeah.
saying be a doormat. I'm saying be honest.
Right. Be
Honest.
honest.
And that's why I called my company The Truth About Addiction. The truth about addiction is that if I don't treat it, it will kill me.
Right.
I can drink today, but I can't drink and have a good life.
No, exactly.
I don't hate alcohol. I loved it.
I did too. I didn't go to that first meeting with any thought that I wasn't going to go home and drink Jack Daniels sitting on my kitchen counter.
Yeah, yeah,
But when I got home, the thought of taking another drink was gone.
yeah. I don't
And
like
I did not expect that at all.
I found I didn't like the person I became when I drank alcohol, and I didn't like the things I had to do to maintain my active addictions. So therefore I stopped. It had nothing to do with not liking the feeling. In the end, the feeling stopped. It stopped working. It always stops working.
Yeah. Right.
The reality is I can drink today, but I can't drink and have a successful life.
Right.
Drink
Exactly.
today, but I can't be a husband and a father.
Right.
So I choose these other things over. I give up one thing to get everything. I just give up the choice of not putting a chemical in my body and changing the way I feel and the way I think and the way I act so that I can act and feel and be a good human being, not a human taking.
Right.
Because when I'm drinking and drugging, I'm a human taking. I'm not a human being. And I don't like that guy.
No.
I got a buddy in LA. He's got a big sign on top of his door. He owns a tattoo studio in Hollywood. And he tattoos everybody, you know, like all the who's of the stars and the movie stars and rock stars. And he has a sign, and I love this. It says, people who are wrapped up in themselves make small parcels.
Oh, I like that.
And all the people that come there don't get it.
Yeah.
They all look at it and go,
Right.
oh, and it's
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And Greg always laughs. We have a laugh about it. We laugh about it all the time. I say, you know,
Yeah.
the people that he's tattooed, you know, like you can go right through the who's of the acting and music world, and he's tattooed them. And they all look at that sign and they all laugh and they don't quite get it. I get it
Yeah. I do too.
because I was a small parcel.
Yeah. Very, very small
Yeah.
parcels.
Now I'm just a guy trying his best to carry a message of hope and faith and belief that you can do it. And that's the big thing that I had a lady this morning I spoke to. She goes, I just want to believe I can do it. She's 5 days sober. I said, you can do it. You're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've just done it for 5 days.
Yeah.
You are doing
That's
it.
the beginning. Right. 5 days is a big damn deal.
And I said that to her. I said, this is giant. And she started to get a tear. She said, I'm really glad you recognise that 5 days is a big deal.
Yeah.
I said, it's massive. I said, and I'm going to tell you something. Every single person in that AA meeting has been 5 days clean
Yeah.
if they've got
That's
more recovery up. I said, so what you're going through, every single person in that room has sat in your 5-day chair.
Yeah.
And she got a big smile on her face because she's very new to the fellowship. She's never been, you know, and she's 50 years of age, and she's like, she's really, look, she's excited and she's scared, which is
Yeah.
which is a normal thing,
Absolutely normal.
you know. And she's got hope. She said to me, she said, I got hope today, Ronnie. I said, now we're going to get some faith and we're going to get some trust.
Yeah.
And that's what recovery is. I said, one day at a time, you can
One
do
day.
this. And she said, I can do it for one day, but I don't know if I can do it forever. I said, stop. We don't have to do it forever. She said, you only have to do it for today.
Yeah.
That's all I do it for. I only do it for today. Yeah. Look, it's been a blessing. It's been a charm.
Oh, it has. It has been lovely. I've just loved this, Ron.
We're going to do it again.
Okay.
We're going to do it
I'll
again.
say
I'm
the,
going to, I'm going
say
to
the
try,
word.
yeah, I'm going to try to set up some things where maybe we can have some other women come on with us. We'll have a group
Oh, that would be great.
a Zoom meeting, but we'll record it and then we'll publish that as well. Put it back onto the social media. People need to hear about you in my country. Can you please plug your book for the women, please?
Well, they can get it on Amazon
Yep.
or any other indie book site. They can get it from Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
Amazon is probably the easiest.
In Australia, that's the easiest. We don't have Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. And so all they have to do is put in the title, Each Day a New Beginning, and it will show up, and they can get it as the book itself, or they can get it as an ebook.
Yeah.
So I think it's always something like this. I think it's nice to be able to hang on to it, and it has a nice feel to it.
I'm going to buy a couple. I'm going to order a couple today myself, so I can give them as gifts.
Okay.
Plus, I want to read it.
Yeah.
I'll get in contact with my feminine side.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you know, when it was first published, and let me show you. Here's the cover of the original book, because I knew the guy that did the artwork for the original cover, and it was always referred to as the Little Green Book.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it's a beautiful little cover. And he was ice fishing in Minnesota, and his truck wouldn't start. You know, I don't know if you know about ice fishing, but people ice fish in Minnesota.
I know it is. I'm a fisherman. I'm a hunter.
And anyway, his truck wouldn't start, so he's walking across the ice, and he comes up to a guy in his truck who was just getting ready to leave, and he says to the guy, "Would you give me a ride into town or wherever you're going? Because my truck is out there and it won't start." And the guy said yes, and Dave got into his truck, and he noticed up on the visor was a copy of Each Day a New Beginning, all kind of faded and looked like it had been opened and closed many times. And he said the guy had a big red bushy beard and lots of hair. And he said to the guy, "You know, I did the artwork that's on the cover of that book." And he said the guy was so kind of nervous and said, "Oh, you know, I know that it's supposedly for women, but I cannot tell you how much it has helped me." And Dave said, "You know, the book has sold a lot to men because it has helped them take a look at that side of themselves." So
Look, you know, that's that picture there.
yeah.
That's me at 13 years old, 13 years of age, holding a machine gun.
Oh my God. You look like it's fitting. It looks fitting.
That's the cover of my book. That's going to be the cover of my book.
Oh, that's a wonderful cover.
And it's called Born into the Life of Crime, but it's got a cross through the F. So Born into the Lie of Crime.
Oh, great.
Because crime is a lie.
Yeah.
It's just a lie. My whole life was a lie. My whole upbringing was a lie. So that's why that photo's there. That's my mum taking that photo, and my dad sitting in the background reading the paper. That's how normal that was for me to be carrying a machine gun through the house.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
And look at your life now, and look at the people you've helped, Ron. Oh my gosh.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it sure is. It's been so nice to talk to you. I've just totally loved it.
We will do it again, Karen.
We'll do it again. Okay.
And I will organise something so I can get some girls into the thing too.
Okay.
I'd like to have a little
Sounds great.
Zoom conference meeting, and we'll talk about
Okay.
that.
That sounds great.
Everybody, thank you very much from the Truth About Addiction. It's been an absolute pleasure and enlightenment. I'm sweaty. I'm nervous. It's beautiful. I don't get like this usually. So yeah, thank you, Karen, and God willing,
Thank you,
we'll
Ron.
see you soon.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.